Millionaire rejected 5 blind dates, until a humble waitress with a secret stole his heart. Before we explore all the details of this incredible story, tell us where you're following us from and the time. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a thing, and let's embark on this journey together. She knew the coffee machine's broken sound meant trouble, but pretended everything was normal anyway. The morning rush at Rosie's diner hit like a tidal wave every weekday at 7:30 a.m. sharp. Sienna Brooks moved through the chaos with practiced grace, her apron strings dancing behind her as she weaved between tables crowded with construction workers, office employees, and the occasional tourist who'd wandered too far from downtown Chicago. 2 eggs over easy, wheat toast, and the man at table 6 was speaking, but his face was turned toward the window. Sienna caught fragments. Easy and toast. She smiled warmly, filling in the gaps with experience. "Coming right up, hun," she replied, scribbling what she hoped was correct on her notepad. The truth was, Sienna had become a master of improvisation. When you could only hear half the world, you learned to read the other half in body language, facial expressions, and the rhythm of people's movements. She'd been doing it for so long that most customers never suspected a thing. Behind the counter, Rosie Martinez, a 60-something woman with silver hair and knowing eyes, watched Sienna work with quiet admiration. Rosie had hired her 3 years ago when most restaurant owners would have passed her by, not because she wasn't qualified, but because Sienna had been honest about her hearing loss during the interview. "You sure you can handle the noise?" Rosie had asked then. "I've been handling noise my whole life," Sienna had answered. "The question is whether you can handle someone who pays attention to details others miss." She'd been right. Sienna noticed when Mr. Peterson needed his coffee refilled before he even raised his cup. She spotted the woman in the corner booth fighting back tears over a phone call. She caught the teenager at the counter, stealing glances at the girl by the window. The morning flew by in its usual controlled chaos. Orders taken, plates delivered, smiles shared. Sienna's world was one of visual cues and careful observation, and she'd built a comfortable routine around it. At 10:15, the breakfast rush finally began to thin. Sienna was wiping down table 3 when she felt the familiar vibration of the front door opening. She looked up to see a tall man in an expensive charcoal suit stepping inside, shaking raindrops from his umbrella. He was handsome in that polished corporate way. Sharp jawline, dark hair slightly mussed from the weather, and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. But there was something in his expression that caught her attention, a tiredness that expensive suits couldn't hide. The stranger scanned the half-empty diner, his gaze settling on the corner booth, the quietest spot in the restaurant. Sienna grabbed a menu and approached him. "Good morning," she said, her voice carrying that warm tone that made regulars feel like family. "Just yourself today?" Grant Marvel looked up and for a moment felt something shift. The woman standing before him wasn't trying to impress him. She wasn't checking his watch or his shoes for signs of wealth. She was just present, genuinely present. "Yes, thank you," he said, allowing himself to be led to the corner booth. "This is perfect." Sienna set the menu down and pulled out her notepad. "Can I start you with some coffee?" "Please." Grant studied her face as she wrote. There was something captivating about the way she focused completely on the task at hand. "You must get pretty busy here in the mornings." "Oh, you have no idea," Sienna laughed, unconsciously positioning herself so she could see his face clearly. "Some days I think I'm running a marathon instead of serving breakfast, but I love it. People are interesting when they're just starting their day, still honest before the world gets to them." Grant found himself smiling, a real smile, not the practiced one he used in boardrooms. "That's a surprisingly philosophical take on restaurant service. Well, you spend enough time watching people, you start to notice patterns." Sienna tucked a strand of her hair behind her ear. "I'll get that coffee started. Do you need a few minutes with the menu? Actually, what do you recommend?" The question seemed to light something up in her eyes. "Depends on what kind of morning you're having. Good day, bad day, or I haven't decided yet day." Grant considered this. "Definitely in the I haven't decided yet category. Then you want the breakfast special, scrambled eggs. They're forgiving if you're having a rough morning, but satisfying if things turn around. Hash browns that are crispy enough to make you smile, and Rosie's famous cinnamon toast that basically gives you a hug from the inside." "Sold," Grant said, closing the menu. "You should be in marketing." Sienna laughed again, and Grant realized he wanted to hear that sound more often. "I'll be right back with your coffee." As she walked away, Grant found himself watching her move through the diner. She had a way of making every customer feel like they were the only person in the room. But there was something else, a quality he couldn't quite identify, the way she positioned herself when talking to people, the way she seemed to study faces before responding. When Sienna returned with his coffee, she lingered just a moment longer than necessary. "I don't think I've seen you here before," she said. "Are you new to the neighborhood?" "No, I work downtown. Just needed a change of scenery this morning." "Well, you picked a good day for it." Rosie made her famous apple cinnamon muffins, and the rain makes everything feel cozier. Grant looked around the diner, really looked. The mismatched chairs, the vintage photographs on the walls, the way the morning light filtered through rain-streaked windows. When was the last time he'd noticed details like that? "You're right," he said. "It does feel cozy." Their eyes met for a moment, and something unspoken passed between them. Not quite recognition, but a sense of possibility. "I should get your order started," Sienna said, though she didn't move immediately. "Of course, thank you. I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name." "Sienna. And you are?" "Grant." "Well, Grant, welcome to Rosie's. I have a feeling this is going to be a good day after all." As she headed back to the kitchen, Grant found himself studying the way she moved, the way she seemed to absorb everything around her. He'd eaten at countless high-end restaurants, been served by waiters who knew his name and his usual order, but something about this felt different. When his food arrived, it was exactly as she'd described, comforting, satisfying, and somehow optimistic. As he ate, he watched Sienna work, noticed how she made every customer feel special, how she seemed to anticipate needs before they were expressed. And he noticed something else. When customers spoke to her with their backs turned, she would gently move to face them. When the elderly man at table 2 mumbled his order, she leaned in slightly, watching his mouth as much as listening to his words. Grant finished his breakfast slowly, reluctant to leave. As he prepared to pay, Sienna appeared at his table with a warm smile. "How was everything?" "Perfect," Grant said, meaning it. "You were right about the breakfast special." "I'm glad." She set the check down beside him. "I hope you'll come back." "I think I will," Grant replied, leaving a generous tip. "Thank you, Sienna, for making my undecided morning into something better." As he walked to the door, Grant turned back for one last look. Sienna was already attending to another customer, that same genuine presence lighting up her face. Outside, the rain had stopped, and somehow the world looked different. Grant stood on the sidewalk for a moment, umbrella in hand, wondering when he'd last felt so grounded. Back inside, Sienna cleared his table, finding herself hoping he'd meant what he said about coming back. There had been something in his eyes, a depth that matched her own hidden complexities. She folded the generous tip into her apron pocket and smiled, and for the first time in months, she found herself looking forward to tomorrow's breakfast rush. Would you have noticed the signs that Sienna was different? Sometimes the most beautiful connections happen when we're not looking for perfection, but for authenticity. 3 days later, he walked through that door again, and Sienna's heart did something she wasn't expecting. Thursday morning arrived with the same familiar chaos, but Sienna found herself glancing toward the front door more often than usual. She told herself it was just habit, checking for the morning rush patterns, but deep down, she knew she was looking for a particular charcoal suit. At 10:20, 5 minutes later than before, Grant Mavell stepped through the door again. This time he didn't hesitate or scan the room. He walked directly to the same corner booth, as if he'd already decided it was his spot. Sienna felt a flutter of something she hadn't experienced in months. Anticipation, maybe, or just the simple pleasure of seeing a familiar face that had shown her genuine kindness. "Well, look who's back," she said, approaching with a coffee pot already in hand. "How was your undecided day?" Grant looked up from removing his jacket, and his face lit up with that same genuine smile. "It turned out pretty well, actually. Good enough to make me curious about what today might bring." "Adventurous," Sienna said, pouring his coffee without being asked. "I like that. So what'll it be today? Another breakfast special, or are you feeling brave enough to explore the menu? What do you recommend for someone who's trying to break out of old patterns?" Sienna paused, studying his face. There was something deeper in that question, something beyond breakfast choices. "Well, if you're looking to shake things up, try the Denver omelet. It's got a little kick to it, but it's still familiar enough that you won't regret the risk." "Sounds perfect." As she wrote down his order, Grant noticed again how she positioned herself to face him directly. Yesterday, he'd attributed it to good customer service. Today, he was beginning to see it as something more intentional. "Can I ask you something?" he said, as she prepared to head to the kitchen. "Shoot." You're very present when you talk to people, more than most. Is that something you learned or just natural? Sienna felt her pulse quicken. The question was innocent enough, but it touched the edge of her carefully guarded secret. I guess I just think people deserve to be really heard, she said carefully. Most of the time, we're all just waiting for our turn to talk instead of actually listening. That's true, Grant said, impressed by her insight. I spend most of my day in meetings where people are more interested in being right than being understood. What kind of work do you do? Real estate development. Mostly commercial properties. Grant didn't mention that he owned half the office buildings visible from the diner's windows. Something about this place, about her, made him want to be just Grant, not Grant Marvell, CEO. That sounds challenging. Building things that last, making sure they fit into communities properly. Grant blinked. Most people either glazed over when he mentioned his work or immediately started pitching him investment ideas. You're the first person who's ever focused on the community aspect. Well, buildings don't exist in isolation, do they? They become part of people's daily lives. Like this place, Rosie's has been here for 30 years. It's not just a diner, it's where Mr. Peterson reads his morning paper, where the night shift nurses from the hospital grab coffee before heading home, where... She paused, realizing she was rambling. Sorry, I get carried away sometimes. Don't apologize. It's refreshing to meet someone who sees the bigger picture. Their conversation was interrupted by Rosie's voice from the kitchen. Sienna, honey, table 7 needs their check. Coming, Sienna called back, then turned to Grant. I'll get your omelette started, don't go anywhere. As she moved away, Grant found himself watching her interact with other customers. With the elderly man at table 2, she made sure to stand where he could see her clearly. With the young mother struggling to order while her toddler fussed, she crouched down to the child's level and made funny faces until he giggled. When she returned with his omelette, Grant was ready with another question. How long have you worked here? About 3 years. Rosie gave me a chance when... Sienna hesitated. When other places might not have. What do you mean? Sienna felt the familiar tightening in her chest. This was always the moment of truth, where she had to decide how much honesty was safe. Let's just say I'm not exactly what most restaurant owners are looking for. Grant studied her face, sensing there was more to the story. Their loss, clearly. You're sweet. Sienna smiled, but he could see she was deflecting. How's the omelette? Excellent. You were right about the kick. Grant took another bite, then looked up at her. Can I ask you something personal? Sienna's heart rate spiked. Depends how personal. Do you ever get tired of taking care of everyone else? The question caught her off guard, not because it was invasive, but because it was so unexpectedly understanding. What makes you ask that? I've been watching you work. You anticipate what people need before they know they need it. You make everyone feel like they're the most important person in the room. That's a gift, but it must be exhausting. Sienna stared at him for a moment, surprised by his perceptiveness. Most people don't notice things like that. Most people aren't paying attention. And you are? To you? Yes. The simple honesty of his answer made her breath catch. I should let you eat in peace. I'd rather talk to you. I'm working. I know, but I'll keep coming back at 10:20 every morning if it means I get to have conversations like this. Sienna felt something shift inside her chest. That's quite a commitment for someone who doesn't usually break out of old patterns. Maybe you're worth breaking patterns for. Before she could respond, the lunch crowd began filtering in, and the diner's energy shifted from leisurely morning coffee to busy afternoon service. Sienna glanced around at the filling tables. I really do have to... Go, Grant said gently. I'll be here tomorrow. Promise? Promise. As Sienna hurried to attend to other customers, Grant finished his omelette slowly, savoring both the food and the memory of their conversation. He'd meant what he said about coming back. For the first time in years, he had something to look forward to beyond spreadsheets and board meetings. When he left, he caught Sienna's eye across the busy diner. She was taking an order from a businessman who was talking rapidly while texting, completely oblivious to her presence. But she looked up at just the right moment, and Grant gave her a small wave. She smiled and mouthed, "See you tomorrow." That evening, as Grant sat in his downtown penthouse overlooking the city, he found himself thinking about the way Sienna had positioned herself during their conversation, the way she'd focused so intently on his face, the way she'd said people deserved to be really heard, and for the first time, he wondered if there was more to Sienna Brooks than met the eye. Something told him that tomorrow's conversation would reveal another piece of the puzzle, and he couldn't wait to discover what it might be. The morning he asked her name twice, Sienna realized her carefully built world was about to crumble. Friday arrived with an unexpected problem. The ancient coffee machine at Rosie's had finally given up, leaving behind only the backup espresso maker that hissed and gurgled like an angry dragon. The sound, what Sienna could hear of it, was sharp and disorienting, making it even harder to catch conversations in the already noisy diner. By 10:15 she was feeling frazzled. The morning rush had been particularly demanding, with several customers speaking too quickly or with their backs turned. She'd had to ask for clarification more times than usual, and she could feel her carefully maintained composure beginning to slip. When Grant walked through the door at exactly 10:20, she felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. Relief because seeing him had become the bright spot of her morning. Anxiety because she was already off her game, and he was the one person she most wanted to impress. "Good morning," she said, approaching his usual table with what she hoped was her normal warm smile. "Morning, Sienna," Grant replied, settling into the corner booth. "You look a little stressed." "Rough morning." "Just the usual Friday chaos," she said, pulling out her notepad. "The coffee machine decided to retire without notice, so we're all learning to work with temperamental backup equipment." Grant chuckled. "I can relate. Half my office equipment seems to have a personal vendetta against productivity." Sienna laughed, but she was positioning herself carefully to see his face clearly. The espresso machine chose that moment to release a particularly violent hiss, and she jumped slightly. "Sorry," she said, trying to regain her composure. "That thing sounds like it's about to explode." "It's pretty loud," Grant agreed. Then, more quietly, he added, "Though I suppose some people might not notice it as much." Something in his tone made her look at him more sharply. "What do you mean?" "Nothing, just... You seem to react to sounds differently than most people, more intensely to some things, less to others." Sienna felt her heart rate spike. "I don't know what you mean." Grant studied her face, noting the slight tension around her eyes. "Sienna, can I ask you something?" "Depends what it is," she said, her voice a little too bright. "Are you—" "Sienna!" Rosie's voice cut through the diner noise. "Table 4 is asking about their pancakes." "Coming," Sienna called back, grateful for the interruption. "I'll be right back to take your order." As she hurried away, Grant watched her go with growing certainty. The way she'd positioned herself during their conversation, the way she'd reacted when he'd lowered his voice, the way she seemed to study people's faces with such intensity. When she returned 10 minutes later, he was ready. "Sorry about that," she said, notepad in hand. "What can I get you today?" "Actually, before we order, I wanted to ask you something." Sienna's grip tightened on her pen. "Okay." Grant leaned forward slightly. "Yesterday, you said people deserve to be really heard. It struck me as an interesting choice of words. I don't follow." "Well, most people would say people deserve to be listened to, but you said heard, like there's a difference." Sienna felt the walls closing in. "I think you're reading too much into my word choices." "Maybe. But I've been watching you work for 3 days, and I've noticed things." "What kind of things?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. "The way you position yourself when you talk to people, always facing them directly. The way you focus on their mouths when they speak. The way you seem to anticipate what people need before they ask." Sienna's hands began to tremble slightly. "I'm just good at customer service." "That's part of it. But there's something else." Grant's voice was gentle, not accusatory. "When that businessman was talking to you yesterday while texting, you didn't just look annoyed. You looked lost, like you were trying to piece together a puzzle with missing pieces." "I should take your order," Sienna said, her voice tight. "Sienna, wait." Grant reached across the table, not quite touching her hand, but close enough that she could feel the warmth. "I'm not trying to make you uncomfortable. I care about you, and I think you've been carrying something heavy." The kindness in his voice nearly broke her. "Grant, You don't have to tell me anything, but I want you to know that whatever it is, it doesn't change how I see you." Sienna stared at him, her carefully constructed defenses crumbling. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Maybe not, but I know that you're the most genuinely present person I've ever met. I know that you make everyone in this diner feel seen and cared for, and I know that whatever challenges you're facing, you're handling them with more grace than most people handle ordinary problems." "Grant," her voice cracked slightly, "I also know that you're scared right now, and I don't want you to be. Not with me." For a moment, they sat in silence, the noise of the diner swirling around them. Sienna felt as if she were standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing that one step forward would change everything. "I can't," she whispered. "Can't what?" "Can't do this. Can't let you—" She shook her head, standing abruptly. "I need to get back to work. Sienna, please, just Order something. I'll be right back. She fled toward the kitchen, leaving Grant sitting alone with a dozen questions and a growing certainty that he'd just witnessed something important break open. In the kitchen, Sienna pressed her back against the wall, trying to steady her breathing. Rosie looked up from the grill, concern creasing her weathered face. "You okay, honey?" "I'm fine," Sienna said, though she clearly wasn't. "That man out there, he's been coming in every day this week, asking for you specifically." "I know. He seems nice, respectful." "He is. So what's the problem?" Sienna looked at Rosie, the only person who knew her secret, the only person who'd given her a chance, despite it. He's starting to figure it out. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. "Rosie? You can't hide forever, Sienna, and maybe you shouldn't have to. Not with someone who clearly cares about you. He won't care once he knows. They never do. You don't know that." "Yes, I do." Sienna's voice was firm, but her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I've been through this before. The pity, the awkwardness, the way people start treating you like you're broken. I won't go through that again." "But what if—" "There's no what if, Rosie. There's just reality. And reality is that I'm better off alone." But even as she said it, Sienna knew it wasn't true. For 3 days, Grant had made her feel something she'd forgotten was possible, the hope that someone might see her as complete, just as she was. The question was whether she was brave enough to find out if that hope was justified, and as she picked up the coffee pot to return to his table, she realized that some questions couldn't be avoided forever. When he asked her out for the first time, Sienna's world stopped, and then started spinning in a completely different direction. Saturday morning at Rosie's felt different, lighter somehow despite the grey Chicago sky threatening rain outside. Maybe it was because weekends brought a gentler pace, or maybe it was because Sienna had spent Friday night replaying every word of her conversation with Grant, trying to decide if she'd overreacted. She'd convinced herself he probably wouldn't come back. After her abrupt exit from their conversation, after the way she'd practically run from his kindness, any sensible person would take the hint and find a different place for breakfast. So when Grant walked through the door at 10:25, 5 minutes later than usual, Sienna felt her heart do that familiar flutter she was beginning to associate with his presence. He looked different today, more casual in dark jeans and a navy sweater, but also more determined, like he'd spent the night thinking just as hard as she had. "Good morning," he said as she approached his table, and his voice carried a warmth that made her previous fears seem smaller. "Hi," she replied, surprised by how relieved she felt to see him. "I wasn't sure you'd come back." "Why wouldn't I?" "After yesterday, I was pretty rude, running off like that." Grant shook his head as he settled into the booth. "You weren't rude. You were honest about your boundaries. I respect that." Sienna felt something tight in her chest begin to loosen. "Thank you. Besides," he added with a small smile, "I'm not that easy to scare off." "Good to know." She pulled out her notepad, grateful to return to familiar routine. "What can I get you today?" "Actually, before we talk about food, I have a proposition." Sienna's pen froze over the paper. "What kind of proposition?" "The kind that involves coffee and conversation outside of work hours." Her breath caught. "Grant, hear me out," he said gently. "I know yesterday got intense, and I know you're not comfortable with whatever it is I'm picking up on. But I also know that every conversation we've had has been the best part of my day." "You don't know me," Sienna said quietly. "That's exactly my point. I'd like to." She looked around the diner, acutely aware of the other customers, of Rosie watching from behind the counter, of the normalcy of Saturday morning that suddenly felt anything but normal. "I can't. Can't or won't. What's the difference?" Grant leaned forward slightly. "Can't suggests there's something preventing you from saying yes that's beyond your control. Won't suggest you're choosing not to, which is fine, but it's different." Sienna stared at him, struck by his perceptiveness. "Why does it matter to you?" "Because if it's can't, maybe I can help. If it's won't, I'll respect that and order my breakfast like a normal customer. And if I don't know which one it is, then maybe that's worth exploring over coffee." The espresso machine chose that moment to emit its angry dragon hiss, and Sienna instinctively moved closer to Grant's side of the booth so she could see his face more clearly. The action was automatic, born of 3 years of adaptation, but as soon as she realized what she'd done, she froze. Grant noticed. Of course he noticed. "Sienna," he said softly, "whatever it is you think I'll judge you for, you're wrong. You don't understand? Then help me understand." She looked into his eyes and saw something she hadn't expected. Patience. Not the kind of patience people used when they were trying to prove a point, but genuine willingness to wait for her to be ready. "If I say yes to coffee," she said slowly, "and things go badly, then we'll handle it like adults. No drama, no hurt feelings, just two people who tried something that didn't work out. And if I say no, then I'll still come here for breakfast every morning and try not to fall a little more in love with your smile each time." The words hung in the air between them, honest and unguarded. Sienna felt her carefully constructed walls trembling. "That's not fair," she whispered. "What's not fair?" "Being so genuine. It would be easier if you were just another guy trying to charm his way into something." "I'm not trying to charm my way into anything, Sienna. I'm just asking for an hour of your time outside this diner." She was quiet for a long moment, watching his face, searching for signs of insincerity or hidden agendas. All she saw was hope. "Where?" she asked finally. Grant's face lit up. "There's a little bookstore cafe about 6 blocks from here. Pemberton's. It's quiet, comfortable, good coffee, terrible scones, and absolutely no pressure." Terrible scones. The worst. But somehow that makes the place more honest. Despite herself, Sienna smiled. "When?" "Tomorrow afternoon around 2. I work until 1 on Sundays." "Perfect. That gives you time to change your mind if you want to." "What if I do change my mind?" "Then you don't show up and I'll understand." Sienna studied his face one more time, looking for any sign that this was a mistake. Instead, she found herself remembering Rosie's words from the day before. "Maybe you shouldn't have to hide forever." "Okay," she said quietly. Okay, I'll meet you for coffee. But Grant," she paused, needing him to understand, "I'm not like other women you've probably dated." "Good," he said simply. "I'm tired of other women." The honesty of his response took her breath away. "I should take your order now." "Right, food." Grant picked up the menu, though he'd already memorized it. "What do you recommend for someone who just convinced the most interesting woman in Chicago to have coffee with him?" "Something that won't go to your head," Sienna said, but she was smiling. Too late for that. As she wrote down his order, blueberry pancakes and bacon, Sienna felt a mixture of terror and anticipation, unlike anything she'd experienced in years. Tomorrow, she would sit across from Grant in a quiet cafe with no customers to serve, no routine to hide behind, no distractions from the growing connection between them. Tomorrow, she would have to decide how much of herself she was willing to reveal, and for the first time in her life she found herself hoping that someone would see her completely and stay. The moment he said, "You read lips, don't you?" Sienna knew there was no going back. Sunday afternoon found Sienna standing outside Pemberton's Books and Coffee, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She'd changed clothes 3 times, settling finally on a soft blue sweater and dark jeans that made her feel confident but not overdressed. She'd arrived 10 minutes early, then spent those minutes walking around the block, gathering courage. Through the large front windows, she could see Grant already seated at a corner table, 2 coffee cups waiting. He looked relaxed, reading what appeared to be a worn paperback, completely unaware of the internal battle she was fighting on the sidewalk. "You can still leave," whispered the voice that had kept her safe for years. "Walk away now, before this gets complicated." But another voice, newer and braver, whispered back, "What if this is your chance to stop hiding?" Taking a deep breath, Sienna pushed through the door. The cafe was everything Grant had promised, warm, quiet, filled with the comfortable presence of people lost in books. The afternoon light filtered through tall windows, casting everything in a golden glow that felt like possibility. Grant looked up as she approached, and his smile was so genuinely pleased that some of her nervousness melted away. "You came," he said, standing to pull out her chair. "You sound surprised." "Hopeful," he corrected. "There's a difference." Sienna settled into her seat, grateful that he'd chosen a spot where she could see most of the cafe. "Thank you for the coffee," she said, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. "Vanilla latte." "I took a guess." "Good guess." She took a sip and smiled. "Much better than Rosie's ancient machine, though not nearly as charming as the company that comes with Rosie's coffee." Sienna felt heat rise in her cheeks. "You're very smooth, Mr. Mavell." "Grant," he said, "and I'm really not. I'm actually terrible at this." "At what?" "Dating, relationships, talking to women I care about without putting my foot in my mouth." "Well, so far you're doing fine." The day is young. They fell into comfortable conversation, easier than it had ever been at the diner, without the constant interruptions of work. Grant told her about his childhood in suburban Chicago, about the pressure of taking over his father's business, about feeling trapped in a life that looked perfect from the outside but felt hollow within. Sienna found herself sharing more than she'd intended, about growing up in a small apartment with her grandmother who'd raised her, about her love of old movies and mystery novels, about her dream of traveling to places where she could get lost in the beauty of the world. "What about college?" Grant asked. "Did you always want to work in restaurants?" Sienna's smile faltered slightly. "I didn't finish college." "That's okay. Lots of successful people didn't finish college. It's not that simple." She stared into her coffee, choosing her words carefully. "I had to drop out my sophomore year, financial reasons mostly, but also—" She trailed off. "Also what?" "It got complicated." Grant sensed the wall going back up and decided to try a different approach. "Can I tell you something?" "Sure. I've been coming to Rosie's for a week now and I've watched you work. You're remarkable at what you do. I serve food and pour coffee. It's not exactly rocket science." "No, it's more than that. You have this ability to connect with people, to make them feel seen. That businessman who was texting while talking to you, you somehow got his attention without making him feel guilty. The elderly gentleman who comes in every morning, you remember exactly how he likes his eggs. That young mother with the fussy toddler, you turned a stressful morning into something manageable." Sienna looked up at him, surprised by his observations. "But here's what really struck me," Grant continued. "You do all of this while being incredibly attentive to things most people miss. Body language, facial expressions, the way people position themselves when they speak. I'm just observant." "Yes, but there's a reason for it, isn't there?" Sienna's pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" Grant leaned forward slightly, his voice gentle. "Sienna, I need to ask you something, and I want you to know that however you answer, it doesn't change anything about how I feel." "Grant, you read lips, don't you?" The question hung in the air between them, like a bridge neither could uncross. Sienna felt the world tilt, all her carefully constructed defenses crumbling in an instant. Her voice caught. "Yesterday, when you moved closer to hear me over the espresso machine, you weren't just moving closer. You were positioning yourself to see my mouth clearly. And just now, when that group at the next table started talking loudly, you turned slightly so you could still see my face." Sienna's hands began to tremble around her coffee mug. "Please don't." "Don't what?" "Don't make me have this conversation." Grant reached across the table, covering her trembling hands with his. "Sienna, look at me." Reluctantly, she met his eyes. "How much can you hear?" he asked softly. The gentleness in his voice broke something open inside her. "Not much," she whispered. "Almost nothing in my left ear. Maybe 30% in my right on a good day." "How long?" "Since I was born. Progressive loss. It's gotten worse over the years." Grant squeezed her hands gently. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because—" Sienna's voice cracked. "Because this is the part where everything changes. Where you start talking slower and louder. Where you start treating me like I'm broken. Where you realize that dating someone like me is more trouble than it's worth." "Sienna, I've been through this before, Grant. The pity, the awkwardness, the way people start editing themselves around you. I won't do it again." "Is that what you think is happening here?" "Isn't it?" Grant was quiet for a moment, processing everything she told him. Then he did something that surprised her completely. He smiled. "You know what my first thought was when I figured it out?" "What?" "That it explained why you're so present with people. Why you pay attention in a way that feels almost magical. You've learned to hear with your eyes, to understand with your heart." Sienna stared at him, waiting for the other shoe to drop. "My second thought," Grant continued, "was that I'd never met anyone braver." "Brave? You navigate a hearing world with grace and kindness. You make everyone around you feel valued and understood. You do work that requires constant communication, and you do it beautifully. If that's not brave, I don't know what is." Tears gathered in Sienna's eyes. "You're not disappointed?" "Disappointed?" Grant's voice was incredulous. "Sienna, I'm in awe of you." And as she looked into his eyes, seeing only admiration where she'd expected pity, Sienna realized that maybe, just maybe, she'd been wrong about having to face the world alone. Have you ever been afraid to show someone your vulnerabilities? Sometimes the moment we stop hiding is the moment we start truly living. When he asked about her abandoned dreams, Sienna realized she'd been living in black and white until he showed her color was possible. The relief of finally being seen, truly seen, left Sienna feeling simultaneously drained and energized. For the first time in years, she sat across from someone who knew her secret and hadn't fled. Grant's eyes held no pity, no awkward sympathy, just genuine interest in understanding her world better. "Can I ask you something?" Grant said, refilling her coffee from the carafe on their table. "After what just happened, I think you've earned the right to ask me anything. What did you study in college before you had to leave?" Sienna's face lit up in a way Grant hadn't seen before. "Speech pathology and audiology." I wanted to work with children who had hearing loss. That's beautiful. What drew you to it? When I was 8, I met an audiologist who changed my life, Dr. Novalee Washington. She was this incredible woman who made me feel like my hearing loss wasn't a limitation. It was just a different way of experiencing the world. She taught me to read lips, helped me develop coping strategies, and most importantly, she made me believe I could do anything. Grant watched her face transform as she spoke, seeing a passion he'd only glimpsed before. She sounds amazing. She was. She told me that people with hearing loss often develop enhanced abilities in other areas, better visual processing, stronger emotional intelligence, heightened awareness of body language and facial expressions. She made me feel like I had superpowers instead of a disability. Because you do. Sienna looked at him with surprise. What do you mean? I've been watching you work, remember? You pick up on things other people miss completely. That young mother whose toddler was having a meltdown last week. You knew he was getting overwhelmed before she did, just by watching his body language. The businessman who was stressed about a presentation. You somehow sensed that and made his morning a little easier. I just pay attention. Exactly. In a world where most people are distracted, you're fully present. That's not just a skill, Sienna. It's a gift. She was quiet for a moment, processing his words. Dr. Washington used to say something similar, that my hearing loss might actually make me a better audiologist because I'd understand my patients' experiences from the inside. She was right, so what happened? Why did you have to leave school? Sienna's expression dimmed. My grandmother got sick. Cancer. I had to choose between continuing school and taking care of her. It wasn't really a choice. How long did you care for her? 2 years. She passed away my junior year. By then I'd been out of school too long, lost my financial aid, couldn't afford to go back. Sienna shrugged, but Grant could see the old hurt in her eyes. Life happened, but the dream didn't die. What do you mean? The way your face lit up when you talked about Dr. Washington, about wanting to help children, that's not something that just goes away. Sienna looked down at her hands. Dreams are a luxury I can't afford. I have bills to pay, a life to maintain. I can't just drop everything and go back to school. What if you could? Grant, no, seriously. What if money wasn't an issue? What if you had support, resources, time? Would you want to go back? Of course I would, but then why can't you? Sienna stared at him. Because I'm 29 years old. Because I've been out of school for almost 10 years. Because I work full-time just to survive. Because I can't afford tuition or books or the luxury of not working while I study. All of those are obstacles, not impossibilities. You make it sound so simple. I'm not saying it would be simple. I'm saying it might be possible. Why do you care so much about this? Grant was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. Because I've spent the last 10 years of my life doing work that pays well, but doesn't feed my soul. I've achieved everything I was supposed to want, and I'm miserable. But when you talk about audiology, about helping children, your whole being lights up. You have something I've been searching for my entire adult life. What's that? Purpose, passion. A reason to get up in the morning that goes beyond just paying bills. Sienna felt tears gathering in her eyes. Even if I wanted to, the prerequisites alone would take 2 years. Then there's the graduate program, the clinical rotations. I'd be 35 before I could even start practicing. And how old will you be in 6 years if you don't pursue it? The question hit her like a physical blow. That's not fair. Life's not fair, Sienna. But that doesn't mean we can't make it better. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of possibility settling between them like a challenge. There's something else, Sienna said quietly. What? Even if I could go back to school, even if I could afford it, there's no guarantee I'd be successful. My hearing is getting worse. What if I can't handle the demands of graduate school? What if I'm not smart enough anymore? What if I've waited too long? Grant reached across the table and took her hands. What if you're exactly smart enough? What if your experience, your maturity, your understanding of hearing loss makes you better suited for this work now than you would have been at 22? You don't understand? You're right. I don't understand what it's like to navigate the world with hearing loss. But I do understand fear. I understand the voice that tells you you're not good enough, not young enough, not whatever enough. And I know that voice is almost always lying. Sienna looked into his eyes and saw something she hadn't expected. Absolute faith in her abilities. Why are you doing this? She whispered. Because someone believed in me once when I didn't believe in myself. Because I think Dr. Washington was right about you. And because... He paused, gathering courage. Because I'm falling in love with you, and I want to see you become everything you're meant to be. The confession hung in the air between them, raw and honest. Sienna felt her heart stop, then restart at double speed. Grant, I know it's too soon to say that. I know we barely know each other, but sitting here with you, seeing your passion for helping others, understanding the strength it's taken for you to build the life you have, how could I not fall in love with that? Sienna felt tears spill over, but for the first time in years they weren't tears of sadness or frustration. They were tears of hope. I'm scared, she admitted. Of what? Of wanting this too much, of believing it's possible, and then having it fall apart. What if it doesn't fall apart? What if this is the beginning of something beautiful? And as Sienna looked into Grant's eyes, seeing her own reflection transformed by his faith in her, she began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop surviving and start living. 3 weeks later, when little Maddox tugged on her apron and asked why she was glowing, Sienna realized love had a way of making itself visible. The autumn air carried the scent of changing leaves as Sienna walked down Maple Street toward the small duplex where her friend Kayla lived with her 4-year-old son, Maddox. It had become a Tuesday evening tradition. Sienna would babysit while Kayla attended her nursing classes at the community college. But tonight felt different. Tonight, Sienna carried herself with a lightness that hadn't been there a month ago. Her phone buzzed with a text from Grant. "Good luck with your little man tonight. Can't wait to hear how the dinosaur book goes over." Sienna smiled, remembering how Grant had insisted on buying Maddox an elaborate picture book about dinosaurs when she'd mentioned the boy's obsession with prehistoric creatures. It was just one of the many small gestures that had become part of their growing relationship. "Aunt Sienna!" Maddox launched himself at her legs the moment Kayla opened the door. At 4 years old, he was all energy and curious questions, with curly hair that defied every attempt at styling and eyes that sparkled with mischief. "Hey, buddy," Sienna said, crouching down to his level. "I brought something special for you tonight." "What is it? What is it?" Maddox bounced on his toes. "A book about dinosaurs that lived millions of years ago." "Really? With T-Rex? Especially T-Rex?" Kayla appeared in the doorway, nursing textbooks clutched to her chest and exhaustion etched around her eyes. At 26, she was juggling single motherhood with pursuing her dream of becoming a registered nurse, a challenge Sienna understood all too well. "You're a lifesaver," Kayla said, giving Sienna a quick hug. "I don't know what we'd do without you." "You'd figure it out. You always do." Still, Kayla studied Sienna's face with the practiced eye of someone who'd known her for 5 years. "You look different lately. Happy different." "Do I?" "Definitely, that guy you've been seeing?" Sienna felt warmth spread through her chest. "Grant." "Yes." "Things are going well?" "Better than I expected." "Good. You deserve someone who makes you glow like that." After Kayla left, Sienna settled onto the living room couch with Maddox curled against her side, the dinosaur book open on their laps. She'd become fluent in reading to him, using exaggerated facial expressions and gestures to bring the stories to life in ways that compensated for any words she might miss. "This one's my favorite," Maddox said, pointing to a fierce-looking triceratops. "He's got horns to protect himself." "He does. Sometimes we all need ways to protect ourselves." "Do you have horns, Aunt Sienna?" Sienna laughed. "Not the kind you can see." "What kind, then?" How could she explain to a 4-year-old about the walls she'd built, the careful distances she'd maintained, the elaborate systems she'd developed to navigate a world that wasn't designed for her? "I guess I've learned to be very good at watching and listening," she said finally. "Like a spy." Exactly like a spy. They read 3 dinosaur stories before Maddox's bedtime, but as Sienna was tucking him in, he grabbed her hand with the sudden seriousness that only children could manage. "Aunt Sienna?" "What, sweetie? Are you gonna marry the bookman?" "The bookman? The one who gave me the dinosaur book. Mama says he makes you smile a lot." Sienna felt her cheeks warm. "It's complicated, buddy." "Why?" "Well," Sienna paused, trying to find words a 4-year-old would understand. "Sometimes grown-ups worry about things." "What kind of things?" "Like whether they're good enough for someone, or whether someone will still like them if they know all their secrets." Maddox considered this with the gravity of a philosopher. "But secrets are dumb." "Why do you think that?" "Because then people can't know if they like the real you, and the real you is the best you." The simple wisdom of it hit Sienna like a gentle slap. "Where did you learn to be so smart?" "Mama says I got it from you. She says you're the smartest person she knows, but sometimes you forget." Sienna felt tears prick her eyes. "Your mama is pretty smart too. Will you tell me more dinosaur stories tomorrow? If you promise to go to sleep now." "Promise." Sienna kissed his forehead and turned on his nightlight, a small dinosaur that projected stars on the ceiling. As she headed downstairs, her phone buzzed with another text from Grant. How did the dinosaur book go over? She typed back, big hit. He wants to marry us both so he can have more dinosaur books. Smart kid. Mind if I call? I miss your voice. Sienna's heart did that familiar flutter. Over the past 3 weeks, Grant had learned to adjust his speaking style naturally, facing her when he talked, speaking clearly without exaggerating, using good lighting when they were together. But more than that, he'd learned to communicate with her in ways that went beyond words. A gentle touch on her shoulder to get her attention. Expressive eyes that conveyed as much as his voice, a way of being present that made her feel completely heard. I'd like that, she texted back. When her phone rang, she settled into Kayla's comfortable chair and answered with a smile in her voice. Hi. Hi yourself. How's my favorite babysitter? Exhausted. Maddox has the energy of 3 normal children and the curiosity of 10. Did he like the book? He loved it. He's already planning our wedding so he can have more dinosaur books. Grant's laugh was warm through the phone. I like his priorities. Speaking of which, I have something to ask you. What's that? My sister Lily is having a dinner party this Saturday. Nothing fancy, just family and a few friends. She's been asking to meet you. Sienna felt the familiar flutter of anxiety. Grant, I know it's a big step. Meeting the family is always terrifying. But Lily's great and I think you'd really like her. It's not about liking her, it's about... Sienna paused, trying to articulate her fears. About whether they'll accept you. About whether I'll fit in. Your family, your world. It's so different from mine. Sienna, my world was empty before you became part of it. These people, they're going to love you because I love you. And if they don't, then they're not worth knowing anyway. The casual way he said, I love you, made her breath catch. It was the first time he'd said it directly, without qualifiers or explanations. Grant, I know I'm pushing. I know this is all happening fast, but I can't help it. Being with you feels like coming home to a place I didn't know I was looking for. Sienna closed her eyes, feeling the truth of his words resonate in her chest. I love you too, she whispered. Yeah? Yeah, and it terrifies me. Good terrified or bad terrified. I'm not sure there's a difference anymore. They talked for another hour, about everything and nothing. About Grant's plans to expand his business into affordable housing, about Sienna's growing interest in researching audiology programs, about small things, the coffee shop that made the best hot chocolate, the old movie theater that still showed classics, the way the city looked different when you were happy. After they hung up, Sienna sat in the quiet living room, thinking about Maddox's words. The real you is the best you. For 29 years, she'd believed that the real her, the one with hearing loss, with limitations, with dreams she couldn't afford, wasn't enough. But Grant saw that real her and chose to love her anyway. More than that, he saw potential in her that she'd forgotten existed. Maybe it was time to stop hiding from her own life and start living it fully. When Grant's sister asked if she'd always been this good at reading people, Sienna realized some secrets had a way of revealing themselves beautifully. Saturday evening found Sienna standing in front of her bedroom mirror, trying on her third outfit in 20 minutes. The navy dress was too formal. The casual sweater and jeans felt too underdressed. The floral blouse seemed to be trying too hard. She settled on a soft burgundy sweater that brought out the warmth in her skin, paired with dark jeans and her favorite boots. Simple, authentic, comfortable, qualities she hoped would carry her through the evening ahead. Grant arrived at 7 sharp, and when she opened her apartment door, the look in his eyes made all her outfit anxiety disappear. You look beautiful, he said, stepping inside to give her a gentle kiss. I'm nervous, she admitted. I know, but you're going to be perfect. What if they don't like me? Impossible. Grant took her hands, studying her face with the patience she'd come to love. But if it helps, Lily's already half in love with you, just from what I've told her. What did you tell her? That you're brilliant, kind, funny, and that you make me happier than I've ever been. That's a lot to live up to. You don't have to live up to anything, Sienna, just be yourself. The drive to Lily's house in Lincoln Park took 15 minutes, during which Grant filled her in on the guest list. His sister Lily, a pediatrician, and her husband Camden, who taught high school history. Their closest family friends, the Hendersons, and Lily's college roommate Zara with her boyfriend. Small group, Grant said, as they pulled up to a charming Victorian house with warm lights glowing in every window. Nothing intimidating. You say that like you don't come from money, Sienna said, taking in the beautifully maintained home. We do okay, Grant said modestly, then caught her expression. Sienna, that doesn't matter. Not to me, not to Lily. not to anyone worth knowing. Lily Marvel opened the front door before they could knock, and Sienna immediately saw the family resemblance, the same dark hair, the same intelligent eyes, the same warm smile that had first drawn her to Grant. "You must be Sienna," Lily said, embracing her with genuine warmth. "I'm so happy to finally meet you. Grant hasn't stopped talking about you for weeks." "All good things, I hope," Sienna replied, relaxing slightly at Lily's easy manner. "The best things. Come in, everyone's dying to meet you." The evening unfolded more naturally than Sienna had dared hope. The other guests were warm and welcoming, the conversation flowed easily, and the food was delicious. Sienna found herself genuinely enjoying the company, particularly Zara, who worked as a social worker and shared Sienna's passion for helping others. It was during the main course that Camden, Lily's husband, started telling a story about one of his students. "So this kid, Jeremy, he's been struggling all semester," Camden said, his back partially turned towards Sienna as he gestured animatedly. "Couldn't figure out what was going on. Then last week I realized—" Sienna missed the rest of the sentence, but she'd become expert at following context clues. She watched the faces around the table, noted the timing of their reactions, and when Camden paused for laughter, she smiled and nodded appropriately. Grant, sitting beside her, noticed her subtle positioning and the way she was watching Camden's mouth when he faced her direction. Without drawing attention, he gently touched her arm and repeated the punchline quietly. He'd been sitting in the back and couldn't see the board. Sienna shot him a grateful look, then found herself genuinely laughing at the story. "That's such a common issue," she said. "Sometimes the simplest solutions are the ones we overlook." "Exactly," Camden agreed. "You have experience with kids?" "Some. I babysit for a friend's little boy, and I used to study child development." "What made you switch to restaurant work?" Lily asked with genuine curiosity. Sienna felt the familiar tightening in her chest, but when she looked around the table, she saw only interested faces. No judgment, no pity, just people wanting to know her better. "Life happened," she said simply. "Family responsibilities, financial pressures. You know how it is." "Do you miss it, the studying?" Zara asked. "Every day." The honesty of her answer seemed to resonate with everyone at the table. Grant squeezed her hand gently under the table. "It's never too late to go back," Lily said softly. "I didn't start medical school until I was 28. Best decision I ever made." "That's different, though. You probably had support, resources." "I had student loans up to my eyeballs and a part-time job washing dishes," Lily laughed. "If you want something badly enough, you find a way." Later, as the group moved to the living room for coffee and dessert, Sienna found herself in conversation with Zara about working with children who had communication challenges. "You have such insight into how kids express themselves," Zara observed. "You picked up on those cues about Jeremy immediately, and you seem to really understand how children communicate beyond just words." "I've always been good at reading people," Sienna said carefully. "It's more than that, though. You watch faces, body language, the whole person. It's like you're seeing things the rest of us miss." Grant appeared beside them with coffee. "Sienna has an amazing ability to connect with people," he said. "She makes everyone feel truly heard." "That's a rare gift," Zara said, "especially working with children. Have you ever considered speech therapy or audiology? You'd be incredible at it." Sienna felt her heart skip. "What makes you say that?" "The way you communicate. You're so present, so attentive to everything someone's trying to express. Plus, you have this natural empathy that you can't teach." "Zara's right," Lily chimed in, joining their conversation. "I see a lot of speech therapists and audiologists in my practice. The best ones have exactly what you have, the ability to really see and understand their patients." Sienna looked around at their encouraging faces, feeling something shift inside her chest. "I actually used to study audiology." "Really? What happened?" "I had to leave school to care for my grandmother. By the time she passed, I couldn't afford to go back." "But you still want to?" Lily asked. "More than anything." "Then you should," Zara said simply. "There are programs, scholarships, payment plans. If it's what you're meant to do, there's always a way." As the evening wound down, Sienna found herself on the front porch with Lily while Grant and Camden loaded the dishwasher. "Thank you for tonight," Sienna said. "Your family is wonderful." "Thank you for making my brother so happy," Lily replied. "I haven't seen him like this ever, actually. He makes me happy too." "Can I ask you something personal?" Sienna tensed slightly. "Sure. You have hearing loss, don't you?" The question was asked so gently, with such understanding, that Sienna didn't feel the usual panic. "How did you know?" My training, partly, but mostly the way you communicate. It's beautiful, actually. You're so present with people, so attentive. Grant's lucky to have someone who really knows how to listen. You're not concerned about me being with him? Lily looked genuinely confused. Why would I be concerned? Because I'm not exactly what most families would want for their successful son. Sienna, Lily said firmly, you're exactly what Grant needs. Someone real, someone kind, someone who sees him for who he truly is. Everything else is just details. As they drove home, Grant reached over and took Sienna's hand. So? Verdict? I love your family. They love you too. Lily pulled me aside and said you're perfect for me. She figured out about my hearing. And she said it was beautiful, the way I communicate. Grant squeezed her hand. She's right. Everything about you is beautiful. And as they sat in comfortable silence, Sienna realized that maybe she'd been wrong about needing to hide. Maybe the right people saw her differences as strengths, not weaknesses. The morning Grant handed her the acceptance letter, Sienna discovered that sometimes the most terrifying moment is when your dreams suddenly become possible. 3 months had passed since the dinner at Lily's house, and autumn had settled into Chicago, with its characteristic mix of golden beauty and bitter wind. Sienna was wiping down tables at Rosie's during the slow period between breakfast and lunch, when Grant appeared in the doorway earlier than his usual time, but something was different about him today. His eyes held a mixture of excitement and nervousness that made her pulse quicken. You're early, she said, approaching with a coffee pot and her usual warm smile. I couldn't wait, Grant said, pulling an envelope from his jacket pocket. I have something for you. Sienna set down the coffee pot, studying his face. What is it? Remember when you mentioned that Northwestern had a good audiology program? Grant, what did you do? I didn't do anything inappropriate, he said quickly. I made some calls. Asked about their requirements, their application process, their financial aid programs. Sienna's heart began to race. Grant, before you get upset, just listen. They have a program for non-traditional students, people who've been out of school for a while, and they have need-based scholarships, work-study opportunities, payment plans. Why are you telling me this? Grant held out the envelope, his hand trembling slightly. Because I took the liberty of requesting an application packet. And because, he paused, taking a deep breath, because I believe in you more than you believe in yourself. Sienna stared at the envelope as if it might contain something dangerous. I can't. Why not? Because it's been 10 years, Grant. Because I'm not that person anymore. Because I don't even know if I remember how to study, how to write papers, how to compete with 22-year-olds who haven't forgotten everything they learned. Sienna. Grant's voice was gentle but firm. Look at me. Reluctantly, she met his eyes. What did you tell me about Dr. Washington, about how she made you feel? That she made me believe I could do anything. She was right then, and she's still right now. You haven't lost that brilliance, that compassion, that incredible ability to connect with people. If anything, your experiences have made you better suited for this work. But what if I fail? What if you succeed? The question hung between them like a bridge she was afraid to cross. Rosie, Grant called to the woman behind the counter. Could Sienna take a short break? Rosie, who had been pretending not to listen to their conversation, waved them toward a quiet booth. Take all the time you need, honey. They sat across from each other in the same corner booth where their relationship had begun, the application envelope sitting on the table between them like a loaded weapon. Talk to me, Grant said softly. What are you really afraid of? Sienna was quiet for a long moment, gathering courage to voice the fears that had kept her trapped for so long. I'm afraid of wanting it too much, and having it not work out. I'm afraid of being the oldest person in the program, of not fitting in, of proving that I really am too limited to do this work. What else? I'm afraid of the debt, of spending years studying only to find out that no one wants to hire someone with hearing loss to work with other people with hearing loss. And, Sienna's voice dropped to a whisper, I'm afraid of becoming someone different, of outgrowing this life, outgrowing us. Grant leaned forward, taking her hands across the table. Sienna, do you love me? You know I do. And do you trust me? Yes. Then trust me when I tell you that supporting your dreams doesn't scare me. It excites me. The thought of watching you become everything you're meant to be, that's not something I want to stop, it's something I want to be part of. But what if I told you that last week I contacted 3 different audiologists in Chicago just to ask about the profession? Sienna's eyes widened. You did what? Dr. Martinez at Children's Hospital, Dr. Thompson at the University Clinic, And Dr. Chen at the hearing center downtown. I told them about you, your background, your insights, your natural ability to connect with people. Grant, you can't just... Every single one of them said the same thing, that the field desperately needs people with your combination of personal experience and natural empathy. Dr. Martinez specifically said that some of her best colleagues are audiologists who have hearing loss themselves. Sienna felt tears gathering in her eyes. Why would you do that? Because I love you, and because love isn't about keeping someone safe in a small life. It's about helping them become who they're meant to be. I'm scared, she whispered. I know, but look at everything you've already overcome. You've built a life, a career, relationships, all while navigating challenges most people can't even imagine. If you can do that, you can do anything. Sienna picked up the envelope with trembling hands. The application deadline is probably past. January 15th, you have 2 months. 2 months to decide to completely change my life. 2 months to decide to reclaim your life. Sienna opened the envelope and pulled out the thick packet of forms and information. As she scanned the requirements, her academic background, the personal statement section, she felt something awakening inside her that had been dormant for years. There's a section here about personal challenges and how they've shaped your goals, she said, reading the application. Perfect. You have quite a story to tell. Grant. She looked up at him, seeing the absolute faith in his eyes. What if this changes everything? What if it changes everything for the better? What if I'm not smart enough anymore? What if you're exactly smart enough? What if no one takes me seriously because of my hearing loss? What if your hearing loss is exactly what makes you the audiologist these kids need? For each fear she voiced, he had an answer. Not dismissive, not minimizing, but gently reframing her terror into possibility. I need to think about this, she said finally. Of course. But Sienna? Grant reached across the table and touched her cheek gently. Remember what Maddox said about secrets being dumb, about the real you being the best you? I remember. The real you is brilliant. The real you has dreams that matter. The real you deserves to fly. That evening, Sienna sat in her small apartment with the application spread across her kitchen table. She thought about Dr. Washington, about the little girl she'd been who'd believed she could help other children like herself. She thought about Maddox and his innocent wisdom. She thought about Grant's unwavering faith in her abilities. And slowly, carefully, she began to write. My journey with hearing loss began before I could walk, but my understanding of its gifts didn't begin until I was 8 years old, when I met an audiologist who changed my life. As the words flowed onto the page, Sienna realized she wasn't just filling out an application. She was finally choosing to believe in herself. 6 months after he first walked into Rosie's, Grant brought her back to where it all began and asked the question that would change everything. The late spring evening carried the promise of summer as Sienna finished her shift at Rosie's, her heart lighter than it had been in years. 3 weeks had passed since she'd received the acceptance letter from Northwestern's audiology program, and the reality of starting school in the fall still felt like a beautiful dream she was afraid to trust completely. Grant had been mysterious all day, texting cryptic messages about meeting him somewhere special and bringing her appetite for surprises. When she looked up from hanging her apron in the back room, she found Rosie watching her with a knowing smile. "So you better get going, honey," Rosie said. "Your young man has been calling every hour to make sure you'd be ready by 7. Did he tell you what this is about?" "He might have mentioned something." Rosie's eyes twinkled with mischief. "All I'll say is, make sure you look in the mirror before you leave." Confused but curious, Sienna checked her reflection in the small mirror by the employee lockers. Her hair was pulled back in its usual work ponytail, and she was wearing her standard black slacks and white button-down. Nothing special about any of it. When she emerged from the back room, she stopped in shock. The diner had been transformed. Every table had been moved aside except for one, the corner booth where Grant usually sat. It was set with white linens, flickering candles, and a small bouquet of sunflowers. Soft jazz music played from a portable speaker, and the late evening light filtering through the windows cast everything in a golden glow. Grant stood beside the booth in a charcoal suit, the same one he'd been wearing the first morning they'd met. In his hands was a single red rose. "Grant," Sienna breathed, her hand flying to her heart. "What is this?" "This," he said, approaching her with that smile that still made her pulse race, "is where it all started. 6 months ago today, I walked through that door looking for coffee and found my entire life instead." Sienna felt tears gathering in her eyes. "You remembered the exact date, May 15th, the day everything changed." He offered her the rose, and she accepted it with trembling fingers. The day I met the woman who taught me that love isn't about finding someone perfect, it's about finding someone who makes you want to be better. Grant, this is beautiful, but sit with me, he said gently, guiding her to the booth. Let me tell you a story. They sat across from each other in the same spots they'd occupied during dozens of conversations, but tonight felt different, electric, full of possibility and promise. 6 months ago, Grant began, I was a man who had everything and felt nothing. I was successful, wealthy, admired, and absolutely miserable. I was going through the motions of a life that looked perfect from the outside, but felt empty within. Sienna reached across the table to take his hand, feeling the slight tremor in his fingers. Then I walked into this diner, and I saw you. At first I thought it was just attraction. You were beautiful, kind, different from anyone I'd ever met. But as I got to know you, I realized it was so much more than that. Grant, let me finish, he said softly. You showed me what it means to live with purpose, to care for others not because you have to, but because that's who you are. You taught me that strength isn't about never needing help. It's about building a life of meaning despite the obstacles. Tears were flowing freely down Sienna's cheeks now. You changed my life too. I know, and that's what I want to talk to you about. Grant stood up, and Sienna's heart began to race as he moved to her side of the booth. Sienna, in 4 months, you're going to start a new chapter of your life. You're going to become the audiologist you were always meant to be. You're going to help children the way Dr. Washington helped you. Thanks to you believing in me. No, thanks to you finding the courage to believe in yourself. Grant dropped to one knee beside the booth, and Sienna's breath caught in her throat. But I don't want to watch you become amazing from the sidelines. I want to be part of your journey. I want to support your dreams, celebrate your successes, and love you through every challenge that comes our way. From his jacket pocket, he pulled out a small velvet box. Sienna Brooks, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Will you marry me? The world seemed to stop. The soft jazz music, the flickering candles, the familiar sounds of the city outside. Everything faded except for Grant's face, looking up at her with absolute love and hope. Grant, she whispered, are you sure? I'm about to spend the next few years buried in textbooks. I'll be stressed, exhausted, probably impossible to live with. I'm sure, he said firmly. I want to quiz you for exams, bring you coffee during late-night study sessions, and hold you when the coursework gets overwhelming. I want to be there when you graduate, when you pass your licensing exam, when you help your first patient. What if school changes me? Then I'll fall in love with who you become just like I fell in love with who you are. What if my hearing gets worse? Then we'll face it together. What if... Sienna, Grant interrupted gently. Do you love me? More than I ever thought possible? Do you want to build a life with me? Yes, but then everything else is just details we'll figure out together. He opened the box to reveal a stunning but simple solitaire diamond. I'm not asking you to choose between me and your dreams. I'm asking you to let me be part of both. Sienna looked into his eyes and saw her future reflected there. Not the careful, limited future she'd planned for herself, but a vast, beautiful possibility she'd never dared to imagine. You really want to marry a broke graduate student who can't hear half of what you say? Grant laughed, reaching up to cup her face in his free hand. I want to marry the woman who taught me that the most important conversations happen with the heart, the woman who sees people's souls, the woman who's brave enough to chase her dreams at 29, the woman who makes me want to be worthy of her love every single day. Yes, Sienna whispered. Yes, Grant marveled. I'll marry you. He slipped the ring onto her finger with hands that shook with joy, then stood to pull her into his arms. As they kissed in the candlelit diner where their love story began, Sienna felt something she'd never experienced before, the absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. When they finally broke apart, Grant rested his forehead against hers. I have one more surprise, he said. I don't think my heart can handle any more surprises. Grant smiled and called toward the kitchen. You can come out now. Suddenly, the diner filled with people. Rosie emerged from the kitchen with tears streaming down her face. Lily and Camden appeared from behind the counter. Kayla rushed in from the street with Maddox in her arms. Even Zara was there, holding a camera and grinning widely. How long have you all been hiding back there? Sienna laughed. Long enough to hear you say yes, Maddox shouted, wriggling out of his mother's arms to run to Sienna. Does this mean you're really gonna marry the bookman? It really does, buddy. Good, Maddox said seriously. Now we can have dinosaur books forever. As their friends and family surrounded them with hugs and congratulations, Sienna caught Grant's eye across the celebration. He mouthed, "I love you," and she mouthed it back, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. And in that moment, surrounded by love in the place where their story began, Sienna finally understood that sometimes the most beautiful endings are really just the beginning of something even more wonderful. 2 years later, as Dr. Sienna Mavell adjusted her new hearing aids before her first day at the children's clinic, she realized that love had taught her the difference between hearing and truly listening. The early September morning carried the crispness of new beginnings as Sienna stood in front of the mirror in their Lincoln Park home, adjusting the collar of her white coat. The embroidered name on the pocket still made her heart flutter. Dr. Sienna Mavell, OD, clinical audiologist. 2 years of graduate school had been everything she'd feared and more than she'd ever dreamed. Late nights studying acoustic theory, early mornings in clinic rotations, the constant challenge of proving herself in a demanding program. But through it all, Grant had been exactly what he'd promised, her biggest supporter, her study buddy, her anchor, when the waves of doubt threatened to pull her under. "You ready for this?" Grant's voice came from the doorway, warm with pride and love. Sienna turned to find him leaning against the doorframe, already dressed for his own day at the office, holding 2 cups of coffee, and wearing the same expression of wonder he'd had the day she'd graduated summa cum laude 3 months earlier. "I think so," she said, accepting the coffee gratefully. "It's strange, you know. All those years of dreaming about this moment, and now that it's here, you're exactly where you're supposed to be." Through their bedroom window, Sienna could see the tree-lined street where they'd built their life together, the small garden Grant had helped her plant, the swing on the front porch where they drank coffee on weekend mornings, the mailbox that now bore both their names. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked. "The simplicity of when we first met, when I was just a waitress and you were just a customer?" Grant set down his coffee and crossed to her, taking her hands in his familiar, comforting grip. "I miss the anticipation of getting to know you, but I wouldn't trade who we've become for anything. Even when I was crying over organic chemistry at 2 a.m., especially then, watching you fight for your dreams, seeing you become the person you were always meant to be. Sienna, it's been the privilege of my life." She studied his face, still amazed that this man had chosen to love all of her, not just the easy parts, but the parts that required patience, understanding, and faith. "I got something yesterday," she said, reaching into her purse. "A letter from Dr. Washington." Grant's eyes widened. "Your childhood audiologist? How did she find you?" "Northwestern sent out a press release about the new graduates. She saw my name and remembered me." Sienna's voice grew thick with emotion. "She said she always knew I'd find my way back to this work, that some people are called to heal the same wounds they carry." "What else did she say?" "That she's proud of me. That she can't wait to see how I'll change children's lives the way she changed mine." Grant pulled her into his arms, and she melted into the embrace that had become her definition of home. "She's not the only one who's proud of you." "I love you," she whispered against his chest. "I love you too. Now go show those kids what an extraordinary audiologist looks like." An hour later, Sienna stood outside the Children's Hearing Center, her new briefcase in one hand and the letter from Dr. Washington in the other. The building was modern and welcoming, with large windows that let in abundant natural light and colorful artwork that spoke to the young patients who would walk these halls. Inside, she was greeted by Dr. Patricia Henley, the clinic director, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and an immediate warmth that reminded Sienna of Rosie. "Dr. Mavell," Dr. Henley said, extending her hand. "Welcome to our team. Are you ready to meet your first patient?" "More than ready." "His name is Lucas. He's 7 years old, recently diagnosed with moderate hearing loss. His parents are overwhelmed, he's frustrated, and honestly, our previous attempts to connect with him haven't been successful." Sienna nodded, feeling a familiar flutter of recognition. "I'd like to see his file, but first, could you tell me about his personality? What makes him light up?" Dr. Henley smiled. "Dinosaurs. The child is obsessed with dinosaurs." 20 minutes later, Sienna entered a bright, cheerful room where a small boy sat slumped in a chair, his arms crossed and his expression sullen. His parents, a young couple who looked exhausted and worried, sat nearby. "Hi, Lucas," Sienna said, settling into a chair across from him at his eye level. "I'm Dr. Sienna. I heard you like dinosaurs." Lucas looked up with mild interest. "So? Well, I was wondering if you could help me with something. I've been trying to figure out which dinosaur had the best hearing. Do you think it was the T-Rex with those tiny ears, Or maybe the Triceratops with those big frills. Despite himself, Lucas straightened slightly. Dinosaurs didn't really have ears like us. They had different ways of hearing stuff. You're absolutely right. They had to be really good at paying attention to vibrations, body language, visual cues. Kind of like how some people learn to be extra good at noticing things when their hearing works differently. Lucas studied her face with the sharp intelligence of a child who'd learned to read between the lines. Do you have hearing stuff too? I do. I was born with hearing loss, just like you. Really? Really. And you know what I learned? Having hearing that works differently doesn't make you broken. It makes you special, like having superhero powers for noticing things other people miss. For the next hour, Sienna worked with Lucas, fitting him with his new hearing aids while telling stories about brave dinosaurs who used all their senses to navigate their world. She watched his face transform from sullen resistance to wonder as sounds he'd been missing suddenly became clear. I can hear the air conditioner, he whispered, his eyes wide. What else can you hear? My mom's bracelet. It jingles. The copy machine in the hallway, his mother added, tears streaming down her face. Dr. Sienna, Lucas said, looking up at her with the serious expression children use for important questions. Will I be okay? Sienna knelt down to his level, remembering a frightened 8-year-old girl asking Dr. Washington the same question years ago. You're going to be more than okay, Lucas. You're going to be extraordinary, and I'm going to help you every step of the way. That evening, Sienna arrived home to find Grant in the kitchen, cooking dinner and humming along to music she could now hear more clearly thanks to her new hearing aids, a graduation gift to herself that had opened up layers of sound she'd been missing. How was your first day, Dr. Marvel? He asked, turning to pull her into his arms. Perfect, she said, meaning it completely. I helped a little boy named Lucas discover that being different can be a superpower, just like someone once helped a little girl named Sienna. Just like that, as they stood together in their kitchen, surrounded by the gentle sounds of their shared life, the simmering dinner, the soft music, the evening birds outside their window, Sienna marveled at the journey that had brought her here, from a frightened child hiding her differences, to a young woman afraid to dream, to a graduate student fighting for her future, to finally this, a woman who had learned that love, both the love she gave and the love she received, was the most healing force in the world. Grant, she said, looking up at the man who had seen her completely and chosen to love her anyway. Yes, thank you. For what? For teaching me that I was never broken. I was just waiting to become whole. Grant kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips, and in that moment, surrounded by the symphony of their life together, Sienna understood that she had found something more precious than perfect hearing. She had found the sound of home. Sometimes the most beautiful stories aren't about fixing what's broken. They're about discovering that we were always complete, just waiting for the right person to help us see it. What did this journey teach you about love, dreams, and the courage to be authentically yourself? Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.